Hello and welcome back to another episode of Denmark 101. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about shoes, specifically shoe culture. Now, coming from Arizona, we quite often left our shoes on. Maybe you would take them off at the entry hall, but for the most part, you usually had your shoes on. You'd wear them around the house. That was quite commonplace. Thinking about other places, Asia, elsewhere, that are famous for taking off their shoes, that's always something that stood out as kind of a big deal, something special that you would do. You would go to a Japanese home, then you had to make sure that you took the shoes off, and that was part of the protocol. Not something that necessarily registers in the U.S. Maybe some houses they prefer that you do. If it's raining outside or whatever it might be, then you would also take your shoes off. Now, Denmark is very similar to Japan in this sense, in that you almost always, say 95% of times, will take your shoes off when you enter someone's home. Now, there's usually larger hallways to account for this. You have just kind of a shoe protocol in general, and normally in an apartment building like the one I live in, where you have different flats on each floor, then you'll have a whole bunch of shoe racks just piled with shoes out in the hallway or immediately inside the doorway. And that's commonplace. Now, partially this makes sense because, of course, the climate and the weather. It's raining quite often, a bit more muddy, all of these different things, which we didn't necessarily have to worry about as much back in Arizona. So it makes a lot of sense then to take off your shoes and not to get the flat in the apartment dirty. I think there's definitely probably a hygiene component to it as well, which there also makes a lot of sense. But then it's also quite interesting to me because so many Danish flats don't have a lot of carpeting. Actually, they have very little carpeting. Maybe they use some rugs, but most have variations on wooden floors. Sometimes those are really nice polished wooden floors. Sometimes they're older wooden floors. But throughout it all, you do see some carpet, but it's quite unusual and nothing like we would have in like I grew up in, where all of the bedrooms and any spaces like that were carpeted. Living room was quite often carpeted. Um, that is quite different because then you're walking around on a wood floor. Wood floors are cold. As wood floors age, there's a risk of splinters. All of these reasons, which you could argue are kind of reasons that I would otherwise have left my shoes on or preferred to do it. But in Denmark, you definitely go barefoot, no matter what. The exception being that there are some people that will leave their shoes on, or for special events, they'll leave their shoes on. Now, with the wooden floors, it also makes sense that you take your shoes off because you don't want to scratch or gouge or have a rock stuck in your shoe that then is going to damage that wooden floor. People will typically indicate to you that it's okay to leave the shoes on when you come in, if it is one of those kind of exceptions. Where it gets a little bit tricky, of course, and you have a little bit of juggling, is if you're darting in and you're just quickly saying hello, or it's a very brief interaction. But even if you're jumping in and just running to the restroom and then running back out your door, you typically take off your shoes, even though that is a pain in the butt, big boots and everything else as you do it. But that's the way it's done. So for foreigners visiting Denmark, remember and be prepared to de-shoe, because it is very important and it is a sign of respect, and there's an unofficial sort of protocol attached to it. And so I'd be curious for the Danes listening and watching, if you have insight into the history of taking your shoes off. Of course, it's a simple thing. There's some basics, right? But if there are specific nuances or some sort of a period where it came from, or if it's just how it's always been done. So, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. This was another episode of Denmark 101.